This is public and live streamed, and we are going to go through the results of the residents monitoring survey. We don't have anything to say from over here, do we? Straight to you. We're going to go through the whole presentation and then we'll have questions. So if you have questions, you can put your hand up earlier. I'll put you on the list, write them down in case you forget them. But we'll go through the whole presentation first. Over to you, Baz and Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Look, this is the residents monitoring survey. We do it every year. It's probably our biggest survey, so it's a perception survey we do of our residents. It's of a scale where we actually have to do it in 2 batches, and in essence it's an annual check-in in terms of what the community is thinking about our services and how they're feeling about the city. And some of the data goes back quite a long way, so we've been doing some of this, asking some of the same questions for close on 10 years, so we've got quite longitudinal data, which is very, very good. What we're going to do is present this information today, give you a snapshot in terms of where we're performing really well, where things have changed quite a lot in some of the challenge areas. We are also going to place that in the context of some quality of life survey data results. And you might not have heard of the quality of life data survey, but it's in essence a survey that's done with other major metros in New Zealand. Ask about quality of life questions, and often they're a little bit similar to the RMS, and in some instances we're able to place our RMS results in the context of what's happening in other cities, so that's always very, very useful. What we're showing you today is a snapshot, so I think Marcus, who's going to do the presentation, it's about 20 slides. The full results is about 130, 140, 150 slides. So that will be made available to everyone, so everyone can have a look at that. But we've really picked the eyes out of it and are focusing on things that we think are most relevant. Of course, you'll have access to all the information that is available. And as the Chair said, it'd be great to give Marcus the talking stick, let him take us through it, explain it, and then at the end we can have questions. So I'll leave it there and hand over to Marcus.
Kia ora koutou. Just Baz has covered a bit of what the survey is a little bit, but just to touch on a few points. So annual survey, and we often get asked where the kind of sample comes from it. So we have what's called our Capital Views panel, which has over 11,000 Wellingtonians on it, and we draw random samples from that for our resident survey, as well as other surveys that we run during the year. The goal of that random sample we draw is to try and get a representative view across the city, and we do that through a sample of 1,100 people who are demographically representative of the city based on age, gender and ward. What that means is the results within the survey have a margin of error of plus or minus 3%. Don't think Baz mentioned, but yeah, this survey kind of feeds into that performance framework, but it's not all of it, it's just a small part of it. And the quality of life one, so as Baz mentioned through this presentation, we try and put some of the resident survey data in context of the quality of life data. I'll try and be clear where I've done that, just so it doesn't cause any confusion, but the quality of life survey is a joint study between us and Auckland, Hamilton, Tauranga, Hutt City, Porirua, Christchurch and Dunedin. Similar kind of methodology where it's like a random sample demographically representative of all of those individual cities. The sample for Wellington for that survey is just over 500. I'll move on to the first section here. So the presentation is broken down into 4 key insights, basically. So this first insight here is that residents, the data we see in the survey, similar to what we've seen in previous years, is that residents love our frontline services. So this covers a few different areas. The first one being pools and rec centres. So through the survey, we asked people whether they use various pools and rec centres and then how satisfied they are with their experiences there over the past year. Across the pool network, we have 77% satisfied on average and 83% for the rec centres. What we also have in this space is tablets in like customer experience tablets within the centres themselves. So they're measuring a slightly different thing, but it's more about, how was your experience today? Was it good? Was it bad? Tell us a bit more. And also asks a few extra things about, like, how was the staff, or how was the spacing in the pools, or how was the changing rooms and all that kind of stuff. And what we see from that is similar high levels of satisfaction for across the centres. And we see out of that data that the key strengths is basically the staff. So they're always rated, at the top of the tree. Key kind of improvement areas across, from coming out of that data is around bathrooms and changing rooms. They tend to be a bit lower on the satisfaction scale. Range of other kind of frontline services that also are very highly valued. So we've got our curbside waste and recycling collection, which is 80, 81 and 80% satisfied. The artificial turf sports fields and grass sports fields, so users of those on average 86 and 78% are satisfied. And our community facilities, so including our libraries, our community centres and our community halls, so over 80% satisfaction among users of those spaces. The only real kind of additional frontline service that kind of isn't at that 75%, 80% level is down the bottom there. So we've got quality of street cleaning and maintenance of roadside vegetation, which there's still more satisfaction than dissatisfaction with those services, but they're a little bit step below the ones I've just run through. And last in this section, so focusing on, focusing on council-delivered events and then also green spaces. So both those two things being highly valued or highly regarded. So in the event space, basically we've seen that 81% of people have satisfied with council-delivered events and cultural events that they've been to in the past year. That since tracking began back in 2014 for that question, it's always been above 80%. And then we have a long list of kind of open and green spaces that we ask about. So your botanic gardens, trails, walkways, waterfront, coastal areas, all that kind of stuff. And on average, we get 73% satisfaction in those, with some of the kind of key spaces like botanic gardens and waterfront being right up the top of that list, so in the 80% plus range. Oops, there we go. So second insight, so this has been talked about in previous years, but we're basically there's still some ongoing challenges relating to city perceptions and kind of city safety being related to that. So this is the first slide where I talk about we've got both resident survey data and quality of life data. So the graph on the left, that's our resident survey data, and it's basically showing the trend of sense of pride in Wellington and perception that Wellington city centre is lively and attractive. What we've seen over that tracking period, particularly since pre-COVID, so since 2019, we've seen quite a dramatic kind of downward shift in that kind of pre to post-COVID survey. So that would be 2020 because that was before lockdowns, and then 2021 being post-lockdowns, post-initial lockdowns. So a big jump, and then we kind of have trickled further down since then on those measures. On the right-hand side, what we've got is some data on a similar measure, so particularly on the measure of pride in the way Wellington looks. We asked that same question in the quality of life survey, and while the average across the quality of life cities has declined between 2018 and 2024, what we've experienced in Wellington on that same measure has been more, basically. So we've been more impacted by it. So safety, again, we've talked about this in the past, and there's not necessarily anything new in terms of where we're at now, whereas where we were last year on this. Like you can see, the data's relatively unchanged from last year, but basically we've come down over a period of time, and we've kind of stabilised now, but we're still kind of at those lower levels. So that's the graph on the left, and on the right, that's quality of life data again. So same question is asked in quality of life around perception of safety in the CBD during the day and after dark. And what we see there, and what's important to kind of provide context on is that where Wellington is at, we're not below average compared to other cities. We're at or slightly above average compared to other cities on these exact measures. Yeah. And in the past couple of years, we've been asking people who said they felt unsafe in the CBD, either during the day or at night, why they felt unsafe. What are the reasons? What's causing them, to feel unsafe? So these are people's own comments, and we go through and we analyse those, and break them, theme them up. So read all the comments, understand what people are saying, theme them up, and when we do that, these three ones, the three kind of themes in green shown, are the key ones that come through. So we've got homelessness, rough sleepers, aggressive and intimidating behaviour, and alcohol and drug issues. So those are the key issues that people basically point to when they say, why they feel unsafe. And you can see those are people's direct comments from the survey underneath those three. And you can see there's a lot of interlink between them, I've tried to pick comments that are kind of demonstrate what other people are saying as well. And you see that a lot when you read through all of the comments in those three themes. People are talking about multiple themes at once, and it's often these three things interlinked, as well as kind of specific references to certain areas of the city and known areas. That's the end of that section. Third insight. So we've seen some shifting, positively shifting perceptions in some key focus areas from that kind of came out of the 21 LTP. The first one being significant progress that we're seeing on the ease of cycling perceptions since 2022. So you can see this question for cycling's been asked back to 2017, and for some of those other modes back to 2014. But the focus here is on the cycling, because that's where we've seen big shifts. So you can see it was at a low point of 17% who had a view of how easy it was to cycle, said it was easy, and that's almost tripled, up to 51% in the most recent survey. Unfortunately, the resident survey now, not unfortunately, there's a specific transport survey we run now which goes more in depth on a lot of these transport issues. So this is a very broad view at the moment, but there's more data that will come through the Pōneke transport survey that the City Insights team kind of pulls together. That'll kind of investigate, more stuff relating to that. And perceived recognition and visibility of Māori culture in Te Reo has grown strongly over the last 4 surveys. So again, there's quite a few statements here, but you can see the pattern is almost identical for all 4, in that there's what is it on average, about 15 percentage points higher agreement with each of those around Māori culture being recognised in the city, being visible in the city, and then council's kind of role in the role council's playing in those areas. Last section. So council, views on council performance and trust kind of remain challenging. We've talked about some of the stuff before, but I've tried to throw in some different quality of life stuff that you may not be familiar with, and we do have this question on the left-hand side there, which is from the resident survey, is one we've only more recently started asking to try and get an overall picture of, perceptions of council performance. So obviously what people, factor into that, how they answer that is up to themselves. But what we're seeing is we're a little bit higher this year than we were last year, but the long-term trend is flat to slightly up, but overall more dissatisfaction than satisfaction at the moment. On the right-hand side there, what we have from the Quality of Life survey is a question around trust in institutions. So local government is presented among other institutions like central government, the media, public education, public health, those kind of things. And where where Wellingtonians, how much they trust their local government, being us, is on par with average across the study. So I guess, the key takeaway there is that the trust is low across the whole sector, effectively, or at least in the major cities. Where this is just major cities we're talking about. So on the people who are in the green, so the 52%, we follow up with them and ask. Well, we actually follow up with everyone, but we follow up with people and ask why they're satisfied or dissatisfied. So the people who said they're dissatisfied with council performance over the past year, again, similar to the safety one, they put their own thoughts in the comment box. We go through that, we analyse it, we theme it up, and then we put it on the slide. So what we've seen is kind of 4 key areas. The one on the far left is kind of double-barreled. There's kind of 2 things there. There's concerns around spending, or so-called kind of or perceived non-essential spending. That's people aren't always clear on what they mean by that, but but then also concerns around rates or rates increases. So obviously closely related. The second one there is around concerns around council's priorities and perceived lack of focus on essential infrastructure and services. That's one that we've seen in previous years, and when we ask kind of reasons for dissatisfaction, like infrastructure usually plays a big role in that. Then we've got concerns around elected officials in 30% of the responses. So these are all around 30% basically. Obviously, people mention multiple. They can fall into multiple of these categories, just to be clear on that. And then the last one there is around dissatisfaction with cycle lane implementation, so being around 30% of people who are dissatisfied, not of the whole sample. And so we have a couple here around, I guess, perception of decision making, and then also that kind of involvement in decision making. So the yellow line, what it's showing is level of agreement that Wellington City Council makes decisions in the best interests of the city. So similar to a lot of other trends we've seen in the surveys, that there was a period of decline between that kind of pre and post COVID time. You can see this one actually wasn't, it was skipped in 2020, but similar pattern. We haven't necessarily, with this one, haven't necessarily fallen any further in terms of, in fact, we've come up a little bit in terms of perception that council's making decisions in the best interests of the city. I guess an interesting kind of thing to consider here is on the far right there, and there's a strong age disparity in the way that people answer this question, with kind of that 18 to 29 group being much more positive in terms of their view of where the council's making decisions in the best interests of the city. That's kind of a consistent kind of like, as the respondent gets older, the kind of the satisfaction is less, basically. The green line there being, that's kind of a measure of agreement that the people believe they have adequate opportunities to basically take part in decision making and council activities. That's remained relatively flat, since we started tracking. So there's not really much to say there, but it's just kind of to provide context that, the perception around decision making is not necessarily directly related to the perception of being able to engage in those decisions. It could be related to other factors. And this last page is only quality of life data, so just to be clear on that. But it's a question that I thought provides interesting kind of longer term trends around perceptions of confidence in decision making. So what we've seen is, and sorry, just try and explain the graph as best as I can. So the solid lines are how Wellingtonians answer this question, whereas the dotted lines are how the average quality of life respondent answered it. So the important thing here is the pattern. There's been a reversal in terms of confidence in local government decision making, whereas back in 2014, 16 and even 18, there was more confidence than not confidence, and then full reversal kind of post-COVID to sit in the other direction, and that's been experienced by both Wellington and cities in general in that study. But again, on the right-hand side there, when you look at kind of influence on decision making, where Wellington sits, 38% of Wellingtonians said they thought they had a large or some influence on council decisions. This has come back, what did I say there? Underneath it, it's kind of lower than it was back in 2016-18, but it's higher than it was in 2022. And where we are now is basically in line with the quality of life average as well. And that's it. That's all the bits.
No, there was.
No, that was 4. Yep, it was this one here. Okay. Yeah.
So I also noticed some people taking pictures of the slides. We will circulate the slides after this briefing, and in that slide pack that we send you, it's got a link to the full survey results, which are available online. Yeah. That will be in half an hour or so.
4 o'clock, yeah.
Okay, do you have questions, councillors? Councillor Chung.
4 o'clock this afternoon. Yeah, 4:30.
Yeah, so obviously this session is public now, so people can watch this. But yes, well, the whole lot of information.
But the full report will be available as well. So we've got a research page on the website, and the full report, the summary, and all the past reports are there. Yeah.
Councillor Calvert.
So why haven't councillors been provided with the full results now, as to help inform us to ask some relevant questions?
I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. It is up to, I think, 145, 150 slides long, so it would take 2 to 3 hours to get through. So we've kind of gone through the results and themed it up in a way which I think is most useful in terms of trying to provide insights in terms of where we're doing really well, where we've got some challenge areas, and where we're seeing some results come through from our investments. And ultimately, all of it will be released to you, and if you have got follow-up questions, we're always happy to meet with you and talk through the results.
But I want to know why we weren't provided with it now. I mean, I can appreciate the 20-page slide, but I'm just want to know why we just couldn't be provided with everything just now through our briefing, so that we can ask questions without reference, where we can't remember even what we've seen on slide 1.
It's already been asked and answered. Councillor Chung.
Great. After we actually receive or after we actually get the results of these things, do we go through a conscious program of addressing each one of these and say, how can we actually do, or what can we actually do to actually reverse the trend or anything? So do we actually do that, or do we integrate that into our normal sort of business and then highlight these items if required?
That's actually a very good question, and the answer is yes. They do come to light. So there's kind of 2 ways we kind of deal with it. So the results are generally fed in to councillors as part of the induction process, as part of a new council, and then of course they're available every year through the standard process, so they can inform annual planning and long-term planning processes. But they're also they're kind of put out to the business units, so the results for things like safety go to the city safety team in Sahai, so they use them, and they'll attach other data to it, like actual real safety data. And then from time to time, of course, you receive reports from those business units advising you on the way forward and the level of investment that needs to be made. So all the information does flow to business unit and makes its way through to advice in terms of decision making as well.
Yes, I'll go to Councillor Pennant, because I think she's had her hand up for a while. Councillor Pennant, sorry.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks, team. It's always interesting to see these results. I had 2 questions. One is about where the middle group of people, the 30s to the 50s, came from on whether decisions were being made in the best interest of the city.
I don't.
Just roughly.
Yeah, I don't have the exact number, but it's in between those two. It's a consistent kind of line from the lowest to the highest group, basically.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And the other question was, which I thought was very interesting, you're basically saying that people's perceptions of the city at night is pretty consistent across the main centres. Do those main centres have, other main centres have issues with people raising concerns around begging or people sleeping on the street?
I might be better to come back to you on that. There is data in the quality of life that ask about those specific social issues, and I can provide information of where we sit versus other cities on those exact issues. I don't have it on the top of my head though.
Yeah, because I'm just interested to dig a bit into that, given people say they don't feel safe, and so that's good to know at least that we're not more unsafe than other places. Thank you.
I have a question, which is sort of about that break post-COVID, and if there's any, if there's any kind of conversation happening between cities or around what the real kind of causes are for that big break on so many issues that has happened post-COVID. Because I think it's really interesting, and it's, you know, for us to kind of know as decision makers about what's driving that. It's probably like I say, it's probably a thesis, several theses.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to answer, and I don't have any ready information available to give to you. But look, it is being experienced not just here in Wellington; it's being experienced across New Zealand and globally to some effect. I think part of the answer lies in terms of where people consume information. Increasingly, we're seeing, Mark has talked about the trust levels of different institutions and pointed out where we sat. We also know where media sit, which actually sit at a lower end of the scale compared to us. And that means that, in my mind, at least, people are consuming information through other channels than traditional media. And as a consequence, I think views are shaped differently than how they have been in the past.
Very interesting. Councillor Chung.
Sort of back to my earlier question, would it be a good idea to say, maybe get all councillors and ELT staff together and say that, okay, this is what is the feedback that we're getting. Can we actually sit down and do a bit of a brain dump into thinking what we can do to actually address these concerns? Because I feel as if what you mentioned before about doing it a little bit ad hoc, I think that things will slip through the gaps that it's only when a business unit actually starts looking at something and say, okay, if we go back to the survey, this is what people think. But it's sort of a little bit ad hoc, whereas we haven't got a concerted effort to actually do this. And so when we looked at the previous years, like when we looked at the graph, it's, they're very similar to what we've had previously. So does it mean that unless we do something, we consciously do something, we're not going to get much of a change?
Can I just say Matt's not here, but I did ask that question of him, so I don't know whether...
He passed it on to me. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, and we talked about that it would be really interesting to do a dive into this. I mean, it's super complex. It's how people receive the news. It's how decisions it's made. It's the experiences they have with their surveys. It's all of those things. But it would be a really interesting discussion and session to have about how might we be able to support a more positive reputation for the council and increase trust and confidence. But it's probably a session and a discussion that's best in the new triennium, because it would need time and a collective and a kind of collective ambition to do so. But yeah, would certainly, from an officer perspective, be really up for that conversation.
I think I was just going to say as well, it's not necessarily something that would make sense to do on a year-to-year basis as well. Like when you look at the actual year-to-year changes of some of these things we're talking about that have long-term downward or upward trends, from year to year, it's often not notable. It's when you look back over 5 years. So it's not. It wouldn't make sense to look at the resident survey every year and go, what do we need to do to address this? It's more like you have to kind of wait for it to build a little bit, just.
And if I can just also add to it, and I 100% support Anna, those kind of discussions are always worth having. we obviously love having discussions about data and insights. It's what we live and breathe on every other day. But look, the thing to note is that it is not the only basis on which to make decisions, because it is a perception survey. So there's lots of other data also available that you need to match and put into the mix before making decisions. So perceptions around safety are real, and they absolutely drive behaviours. But of course, there are actual crime statistics that you need to be bringing into the picture as well to inform decision making.
I'll put you back on the list. Councillor Free.
Thank you for including the quality of life survey and the averages from other cities, because I'm wondering if we can have more information about that quality of life survey, or is it publicly available somewhere?
Yeah, publicly available. There's a quality of life website. We can send a link to it.
Yeah, that would be useful. I found it quite interesting to look, just to be able to sort of get a sense of where the rest of the country might be at in terms of the large metros, because I think sometimes we think we're the only ones with problems, but actually some of this is nationwide, some of these things.
Councillor Chung.
Yeah, what I'm thinking is that how many of these things are actually, can we actually contribute to actually rectifying, and how many of these things would be things that are beyond our control? Like, for example, in the survey where people said they felt unsafe to come into the city and they had alcohol and things in there, well, does that have implications for when we actually approve licensing applications? Like, is it our fault that those people are drunk? Because how can we actually change people's behaviour? But can we actually do something like that if we look at the amount of licensing that we do? I don't see the correlation between what we do and what we can actually do.
Yeah, I won't answer about the specifics because I don't necessarily have the technical knowledge in that space. But what I'll say is that in some instances, it will be our role to look at addressing some of those things. And in other instances, we'll have a different role to play. So, where we're not a deliverer of a service or where we genuinely can't have a role, we can always advocate to others that are more or better placed to act in that space. So I think we can always do something. It just depends on what it is. And if there's someone better placed to do something, then we're having an advocacy role in that space, yeah.
Great.
As predicted, not that many questions. Anyway, I'm sure we'll all be absorbing the results, including looking at the full one, and I'm sure coming up with a variety of interpretations of what they mean, unrelated to our previous views, I'm sure. Thank you so much, Marcus, for all the work that went into it. It's much appreciated. Thank you, team.
Thank you.